you're probably not eating enough to support your training, support your recovery. But I think a lot of athletes are surprised to find that just some little tweaks in their carb intake, especially after a workout, can do so many incredible things to the amount of soreness that they feel moving forward.
Welcome to the Uphill Athlete Podcast. I'll be your host today, Steve House, and joining me is Alyssa Leib. Alyssa is going to talk about diet and recovery. Alyssa, as you know, is our in-house dietitian. Welcome, Alyssa.
Oh, thanks, Steve. Happy to be here. I know this is a really important conversation that I get a lot of questions about. I've had a lot of athletes who I think initially, reach out to me to work together because they find that they're having trouble recovering.
Absolutely.
Their coach, whether it's you or somebody else, kind of sends them in my direction. So it's very important to talk about.
Yeah. And, there's also kind of this, I would say, lore around recovery. And I remember years ago, somebody telling me there's no such thing as overtraining, just under recovery, which, there's a grain, there is like any of these things that sounds good, like as sound bites, there is a grain of truth to it. It's not strictly true, of course, but the diet and nutrition component of recovery is big. And I think it's really important for our athletes community because we have a lot of people, whether they're like trekking to Everest Base Camp and they're staying in a different lodge every night, or they're doing a mountaineering trip and they're camping every night, or they're on an expedition and they're at a base camp for 2 months, or they're training to do their first 50K and they're building up into running volumes that they've never experienced before. I mean, any one of these use cases is going to be, calling into question and how well a person is, providing nutrients to their body through their hopefully primarily diet, and as we've talked about, also possibly some supplementation. But this can be a real area where people can, I think, improve with just a few, I'd say, relatively simple tweaks and some basic good understanding and knowledge of how the diet can support recovery. So let's dive into it. Like, how much does a person need to eat when they're training for their first 50K?
A lot. And it's again, like always, hard to give a general recommendation just because, especially something like calorie intake is so individual. We've got genetic factors, individual metabolic factors. Everyone's body is going to utilize energy more or less efficiently, just depending on, whatever's going on in their body. So there's a lot of factors that go into it. And this is something that, I work with a lot of athletes on, is trying to just really be detectives and help identify signs in their own body that maybe they're not quite meeting their needs. So really looking at those subtle cues, hunger, of course, being a less subtle one. If you're feeling hungry, you need to eat. You're probably not eating enough to support your training, support your recovery. But then really just getting in tune with how your body feels and being able to identify when something feels a little bit off, when you feel like you're, not able to perform, your energy levels feel a little bit low, you're having more fatigue than you're used to, your recovery is feeling pretty bad in between sessions. These are all going to be things that really help us dictate, okay, well, let's bump up your nutrition. Let's make sure that you are eating more so that you can support your recovery through all of this.
Yeah, that's great. And as I think about like my coaching and what discussions we have on the coaching team, we talk a lot about the art and the science of coaching, right? And the art, I think, is often when I'm asking athletes about, how are you doing today? How do you feel this morning? Just those, like, just that. They think it's just like nice banter, and on some level, of course, it is. But I'm also I'm looking for those little clues, little words that they might say, like, yeah, I'm still sore after that workout, or, I didn't sleep that well, and then those are things like I'm kind of drilling into, because a lot of people will have this feeling that, they should just be tough. Like, I shouldn't complain. of course I'm sore because I'm training a lot, or of course, like I do not sleeping very well and because I have restless legs at night or whatever it is. And, once, or a lot of times I'm just telling people like, hey, you got to tell me when you're sore or when you feel like restless legs at night or when, you need to eat, but you've actually lost your appetite or any of these things that can happen because those are things we actually need to dig into and uncover, like as you said, be detectives about and like figure out what's going on, because that's how we keep the wheels from like completely falling off by catching things as early as possible.
Yeah, it's super interesting. And I guess, I know this it moves away from the nutrition conversation, but I would be very curious from your perspective as a coach, what level of fatigue and DOMS and soreness and, lack of recovery is, either expected or even in some cases sort of part of the intended training effect. Because I know that's just to your point. I think a lot of athletes sort of feel like, well, this is a normal component of it. And so they don't think about it. Or on the other end of the spectrum, I also get athletes who come to me and they're like, well, I was really sore after my workout yesterday. And I ask them more questions about it and, come to find out that it was a really long run with a lot of vert. And, it was some soreness there is to be expected. So what is that appropriate amount?
Yeah, and of course, I'm sorry to say that the answer is it depends. But if I kind of think about it, and there's this great chart that we have in the books about kind of the intensity as it relates to the recovery period, and it sort of is this. I think that the textbook chart that's in a lot of physiology books, which will say, a strength training load, you're going to be sore for up to 48 hours. A zone two workout, you're going to be fatigued for, 6 to 24 hours. A zone one workout should, make you feel better within a couple of hours. These kinds of things. And while that's generally true, if when you're doing, especially athletes that are more progressed in their training and they've been training for more than 4 months, they start to get into some weeks where they've got some pretty hard workouts, maybe a muscular endurance workout that's hard, maybe a long zone two workout and you start to stack those. And that we think a lot as coaches about the training density, which means like how close together in time are the hard workouts and how much they're separated by a recovery workout or a rest day. And you can really, you start with those big training loads pretty isolated from each other in terms of a 7 to 10 day cycle. One of the ways you progress people is by moving those closer together, because that's what the event is like, right? The event is that you're going to do all of this in one day or all of this in a 2 day period. So you're building towards that. And so when you start to you should be kind of treading that line where it's like anything more than 2 days, I actually really want to know about it. And I had an athlete the other day, he did 15,000 feet, okay, in one day. So just a huge workout. Yeah, that was 4 or 5 days ago now, and he's still sore. And he was mentioning that today, which is great. And we talked about it, and we talked about how he could support his recovery and making sure he was eating enough carbohydrate and that kind of thing. But that's a workout that's so hard. And it's like, yeah, okay, I'm probably not going to prescribe that workout again right away. And maybe I overreached a little bit with it as a coach, and it was actually a little bit too much because I see now he's sore 4 or 5 days later. But at the same time, this guy's in his 20s. He's young, he's strong, he's healthy. I'm not really that worried about it. Like if that was an athlete, like one of my other athletes who's like 57 and has some history of some joints that are a little cranky, that would be another thing. Like I wouldn't be going near him with that kind of workout. So you have to take this all into consideration. But I think that 24 to 48 hours is pretty normal, and when it starts to extend beyond into 72 hours, you got to really start asking questions.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. No, that's very interesting. And I think it also shows the benefits of having, a multidisciplinary coaching team, right? So,
Yeah.
that's something where we can be in conversation about, mutual athletes who we coach to get a better understanding of, okay, well, do I as the dietitian really need to start tweaking this athlete's nutrition because they're experiencing this kind of soreness, or was that the intended effect?
Yeah. And I think one of the things that we are most tuned into is carbohydrate, right? Like especially during training. And we've seen this big shift in our approach, and it's been working great, paying great dividends. People are recovering better and basically just progressing better through their training because they're eating enough carbohydrate during the training. Maybe I think is less of a factor, but especially after the training, before and after the training, and not going into these things fasted. I think that's really proving out to just be a huge improvement.
Yeah, I have worked with countless athletes who are shocked because I think, and I guess just backing up a little, I think a lot of us have this kind of conception that when it comes to recovery, what we care about is protein, because protein is what we need to build muscle. And we do need protein. We absolutely need protein. But I think a lot of athletes are surprised to find that just some little tweaks in their carb intake, especially after a workout, can do so many incredible things to the amount of soreness that they feel moving forward. So it really, really often does come down to carbs.
Yeah. Yeah. When I was training full time, I would, this just sort of developed instinctually, but I would make a peanut butter and jelly bagel and have it there in the car at the trailhead waiting for me, because I knew when I got back I was just ravenous after a big workout. And I also had read, back then it was, Nancy Clark's Sports Nutrition Bible. Remember that? I mean, this is 25 years ago, and that was the state of the art, and that's what she was, recommending back then. So, that's just good. Still, sort of, I think of it as good hygiene, almost like it's dietary hygiene after working out to get that immediate snack in and get enough carbs and stuff.
Absolutely. Nancy Clark's, by the way, is still the Bible.
Is it still? Okay.
Yeah,
It must be in like the 15th edition or something now.
it's pretty, actually, I have it on my desk. I have the sixth edition, so it's a couple years old at this point, but it's very much still something that I commonly see recommended. I like it, I guess, just as a plug for anybody listening. I think it does a really good job of tying in some of the science without being overwhelming. So I think it is still pretty digestible for an average audience who maybe is interested in the science.
Yeah,
I'm not sponsored
absolutely.
by Nancy Clark, by the way.
Right, right. No affiliate program here. So, what are some of the things that you recommend? I mean, first thing is checking that people are getting enough carbs. People instinctively are probably already thinking about protein. We've talked about supplementing with protein in another podcast and article. What are some of the hacks that you've seen work for recovery?
Yeah. So I guess I will caveat all of this with if you are not meeting those kind of basic nutrition needs that you just mentioned, Steve, the hacks are really not going to do anything for you. So, first and foremost, are you eating enough total calories? Because if you are not, there is no amount of tart cherry juice that you can take that is going to make you feel better. You need the calories. There's no way around that. So beyond the calories, I'm also checking on, are we getting enough total carbs? Are we getting enough total protein? And then I'm also looking at just the timing of all of your meals. So really looking at, okay, well, when are you eating relative to your training? Are you eating consistently throughout the day so that your body is getting a consistent stream of energy so it can continue to do that repair work? When are you eating relative to finishing your training? Is there a way that we can move that recovery meal closer? And so there's a lot of different things going on when it comes to actual food. And once you have those kind of dialed in, I would say only then should you start thinking about some of these hacks.
Okay.
And there's a lot of different sort of approaches to this. The first one that I generally recommend to people who are kind of interested in that optimization, like taking that next step, is pretty simple: glass of milk before bed. There is, actually some substance behind this. I've mentioned in previous podcasts, milk really has two different types of protein in it. And so we normally think of whey protein. That's where, most of our protein powders end up being whey. But there's actually another protein in milk called casein that tends to sort of drive the show from a bedtime recovery perspective, which is pretty cool. So the glass of milk can improve your sleep quality, which is pretty nice. So that's sort of why that's the standard that our moms used to tell us when we were little: drink your warm glass of milk before bed, you'll sleep really well.
Mom was right. Once again.
Usually is. She usually is.
Yeah.
So that glass of milk, or it could be a yogurt. In some cases, a casein supplement could be an option that will improve your sleep quality, and it also helps with just muscle recovery and repair while you sleep. So sleep, and I guess I didn't mention this with sort of that baseline thing you have to do around our nutrition, but getting enough sleep is the other kind of key thing that you really can't hack yourself away from. You have to be getting enough sleep. That's where most of our recovery happens. But glass of milk, pretty simple.
Okay. What else?
Yeah. So
I've done my milk. What do I do next?
So next, I would be thinking about what are some other things that we can do to promote sleep if that is a concern. So magnesium is the one that usually comes to mind for that. Certain forms, there's magnesium. I know we've talked extensively about supplements at this point and how overwhelming it can be to walk into that store and see 30,000 options. Magnesium, I think, is a really good example of this because there are so many different forms of magnesium, and many of them are sort of designed for different things. So if you are trying to improve your sleep quality or relax your muscles and you take magnesium citrate, you are going to wake up the next morning with a bathroom emergency. It's not going to do the thing that it's supposed to do. But when it comes to muscle relaxation, sleep, things that can support recovery, I'm normally recommending a magnesium glycinate or bisglycinate form. And really, this just acts as a muscle relaxant. A really common supplement brand that you'll see is called Calm, CALM. And it really is designed to be taken 30 minutes before bed. And it just relaxes your muscles, helps you to feel, kind of sleepy, and then promotes that muscle recovery overnight. It doesn't have to be a supplement either. Eating a handful of nuts can provide you with some of that magnesium before bed. That can have a really similar effect. So that's something else that I would try.
Yeah, that's interesting. So one of the things that we used to do alpine climbing was I would have a Ziploc bag of cashews. And because one of the things that happens with alpine climbing is you get to the place you're going to bivvy, and then you usually have quite a bit of work to do to like prepare the spot so you can lay down and to get the stove going and all these things. And often you have no water or whatever. And we would just eat unsalted, dry roasted cashews or raw cashews. Just because they're like, it was one of these nuts that we could kind of get down when we were still kind of thirsty and we were starting to just get something in us that was going to help just replenish calories. I wasn't so concerned about the macronutrient distribution. It was just more like, what can we carry and eat that is relatively calorie dense and easy to get in at the end of a long day.
Well, and there's a lot of, we've talked about this both on this podcast, and I know I have talked about it all the time, but at the end of the day, as an athlete, the most important thing you can do nutritionally is make sure that you are eating enough calories. And nuts are a really great way to do that. Obviously, we've talked about, the importance of eating carbs, and we talk about protein. I feel like fat sometimes kind of takes a back seat, but at the end of the day, fat, which is, primarily what nuts are, is a really incredible way to meet your calorie needs. So you are probably, supporting your recovery in more ways than one through that.
What other hacks are up your sleeve?
Yeah, the other big one, and this is one I get so many questions about, which is why I've kind of saved it for last because I wanted people to hear about drinking milk and eating nuts first. Is really these antioxidants. And there's a few different ones that we've seen kind of pop up on the market. If you go on the feed, you can buy them in convenient little packets, or, there's even pill forms that you can take them. So they make it really easy for you to kind of maximize these antioxidants. I guess I can go into a little bit on just kind of what is an antioxidant and why do we want it, because I know that is very much a radicalized term that has, kind of been thrown around to the point where I think most people don't realize that it does actually mean something. But essentially, when we do work, when we put stress on our body produces these things called free radicals or free oxygen species. This is what, whenever we think about like x-rays and the damage that causes, that's essentially what we're thinking about. But exercise actually causes our body to produce these free radicals at a higher rate. And so the more you're training, the more work you're putting your body through, the more you are producing these free radicals that can really cause damage to your cells. And that's where antioxidants
Okay.
come in, because they really help to almost, I'm going to use the word buffer, but that's not the scientific process that's happening. But that's essentially what happens is these antioxidants come in and almost buffer out these free radicals, so that it prevents this cell damage from occurring. So antioxidants are very much something that we're still trying to learn about, in the context of just regular nutrition and nutrients that people have heard of. Vitamin C is a really powerful antioxidant. That's an example. The mineral selenium is a powerful antioxidant. But plants also have these things called phytonutrients, which they're not nutrients, but they're just little compounds that we find in fruits and vegetables, and they can have antioxidant properties as well. And so that really is where things like tart cherry juice or black currants really have their power. And I kind of like to describe both of these things as almost like blueberries on steroids. So blueberries have this really strong antioxidant effect because of the phytonutrients that they contain. Both tart cherries and black currants have a very high concentration of very similar antioxidants like that. So it takes a smaller dose to have a larger effect. And these are things, you can buy tart cherries, you can buy tart cherry juice in a bottle. I assume that somewhere in the world you can buy black currants. I have not personally seen those at my grocery store. But that's really where, these supplements can be really beneficial. Again, if you just need that hack, that extra edge for your recovery, you've done all of these other things and you just want to really make sure that you are maximizing your recovery. That's where turning to things like tart cherry juice or black currants can really help with that recovery process.
Yeah. And one of the threads I'm hearing here is that a lot of this, maybe not so much black. I mean, tart cherry juice is also kind of promoted as a sleep aid, right?
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
and so all of these things have this kind of thread of sleep through them. It feels like the glass of milk before bed, the magnesium, the calm magnesium, the black tart cherry juice, all of these things, and having enough food, having high quality food, having enough carbohydrate, enough macronutrients, and then being able to sleep well. I mean, that's the thread. Like that's the bottom line, is everything is leading up towards that good night's rest.
Yeah, absolutely. Which is, especially for a lot of uphill athletes, and I'm sure the majority of people who are listening to this, it's hard. People who are
Yeah.
balancing having a family, having a career, and then on top of it, trying to do all of this training. It's hard to find 8 hours of sleep, let alone 9 or 10, which is what many of us need, especially when we're engaging in a higher level of training.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Great. Well, this has been super useful. I'm going to go out and make sure I get some tart cherry juice and see if I can find some sleepy magnesium concoction. But I will continue to listen to what mom said and drink my glass of milk before bed. That's great. I like too that one of the best like recovery things. I remember one time being doing a climb in the Black Canyon, and when I got back to my campsite, my friend Josh Wharton had left me a little bottle of chocolate milk. And I love that chocolate milk is still, he had taken some ice out of his cooler and sort of packed it around the carton, and it was sitting there on the table, and it was all kind of melting by then. But I like that, sometimes these very simple things, what does chocolate milk have in it that makes it a good recovery drink? Well, it has casein, as you said, but it also just has sugar, it has carbohydrates. And, those are, it doesn't have to be super complicated. It doesn't have to be, this blend of mysterious powders and everything else. It can be, as my wife used to call it, science food. It doesn't have to be science food. It can be just like regular old food that we know where it comes from. So that's great. So drink your chocolate milk too, and that's my recovery hack.
Also, not an ad, not sponsored by chocolate milk.
Not sponsored by chocolate milk. So thanks everyone for listening. Thank you, Alyssa, for bringing your knowledge and helping us figure out how to support recovery through proper nutrition. Remember, we're not just one, but a community. Together, we're Uphill Athlete. I've been your host, Steve House. Thanks for joining us.